What's going on, everybody? Nick Whalen, Kyrie Sprecher here with me on this Monday. It is January 6th, the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Kyrie, I appreciate you stepping in for our good friend Alex Barutha, who is too sick to pod today. So we send out our condolences to Alex Barutha, officially ruled out for Monday's slate. Will be questionable for the back-to-back on Tuesday. We got a lot of news to get to. We'll hit all the big news items from the weekend, talk about some of the notable performances, some waiver wire ads, some drops that we made, some players to consider taking a closer look at this week. And of course, as always, we'll get to all your questions in the chat. So keep stacking those up in there. You guys always give us a ton of great fodder. We'll hit those over the second half of the show. We just got some injury news, Kieran, like 2 minutes ago on Kyrie Irving. So just adding to the laundry list of big name players going out. Obviously, Dallas already dealing with the loss of Luka Doncic. He's going to miss a few more weeks, ended up getting hurt on Christmas Day. The word from Shams Charania is that Kyrie Irving expected to miss at least 1 to 2 weeks with a bulging disc in his back. So we already had some increased opportunity in Dallas. You know, guys like Quentin Grimes, Jaden Hardy, Najee Marshall, obviously Spencer Dinwiddie. That was with Luka Doncic down. Now we're taking another, 36 to 38 minutes out of this rotation for a couple weeks?
Yeah, I mean, Kyrie has missed a couple games recently in addition to Doncic, so we do kind of have a blueprint what they're going to do when both of those guys miss. You mentioned Grimes, Dinwiddie. I think those are the two most obvious plays. I really like Jaden Hardy. But it's only because he's a mystery box, right? Like we know what Quentin Grimes is, we know what Spencer Dinwiddie is. Dinwiddie is going to have those explosions, and then he's going to score 4 points the next night. Grimes is going to hit you some threes. I really hope they just let Jaden Hardy ride and see what he can produce over the next week or two if they're going to be without Kyrie and Luka.
You said it perfectly on Spencer Dinwiddie, who had that 30-point game, right after Luka went out. Hit he had like a huge game from the free throw line, hit a bunch of threes, and the last 2 games he's played almost 50 combined minutes, and he's given you 10 combined points. So I think you kind of know what you're signing up with Spencer Dinwiddie. He's played for every team in the NBA, and it's always the same story, no matter what. I think Grimes has been the most dependable of all these options since Luka went out. He had the big game against Cleveland on Friday, 26-6, 7 of 7 at the line, did go just 1 of 5 from 3, but he's been a pretty consistent, 2.5 threes per night guy. Certainly for the next couple of weeks, I think he's probably looking at maybe close to 35 minutes a night. Kyrie didn't play on Friday. We saw Grimes in the starting lineup, played 33 minutes. But I like your call on Jaden Hardy. I mean, when the minutes have been there for him over these last couple of years, always turns in some interesting performances. Had a few big games off the bench toward the end of last season. And, by default, I think he's going to be a guy who could be touching 30 minutes over these next couple of weeks. I mean, Dallas, they are a relatively deep team. We just mentioned some of this guard depth. They have some interesting pieces on the wing as well. But I think we see a lot of all those guys. And, if you're in a deeper league, would you consider taking a look at Najee Marshall, once that suspension is up, which I believe he should be eligible to return for their next game. Dallas is in action tonight at Memphis, front end of a back-to-back, and they're home for the Lakers on Tuesday.
Yeah, Marshall should be back in the lineup. I mean, yeah, I would take a look at him. I mean, he had that string of, 2 weeks earlier in the season where he was fantasy relevant. I don't think you're checking your waivers at 3 a.m. Oh yes, I got Najee Marshall, but he's a fine play in the interim. Maybe he can score you 20 and get you 4 boards once a week, and that's enough at this point with all the injuries.
Yeah, I'm looking at ESPN right now. So if you're in a league that allows you to make waiver claims, before games start on Monday, if you're in a daily lineups league, Quentin Grimes 8% rostered, Najee Marshall 1.8% rostered, Jaden Hardy 0.4% rostered. So a good chance all those guys will be out there in your leagues. But again, if you're just tuning in, Kyrie Irving out at least 1 to 2 weeks with a disc issue in his back. We've got some news on Zion Williamson, Kieran. I always tread lightly anytime we get these little morsels of Zion Williamson updates. But something encouraging via Will Guillory of The Athletic. He reported earlier this morning via Coach Willie Green at his presser, said Zion could return to action at some point this week. So really the first time that we've been given any sort of real timetable. We've gotten some, he's back at practice, he's moving around, but they hadn't put a date on it. Pelicans are off Monday. They play Tuesday at home against Minnesota, Wednesday home against Portland, at Philly on Friday, then at Boston on Sunday. Ideally, you'd like to see Zion come back for one of these home games. Gets a little bit dicey when you're bringing back somebody on the road from a long absence. But either way, even if he doesn't play this week, it feels like it's coming in the next week or two.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like next week is probably when you can feel like the safest to throw him in your starting lineups, barring a setback in the next couple of days, obviously. Right. Zion is a touchy subject for me. Going into this fantasy season, games played is like the biggest factor for me. Like I just want to be able to set my lineup and forget about it. And obviously Williamson is a huge red flag in that category, but I just kept looking back at him playing 70 games last year. And I convinced myself, I was like, Williamson's going to be different this year. With the new rules, you got to play 65 games or whatever it is to get first team all NBA, to get eligible for all of these awards. Williamson pushed through. He wants to get these awards. He's a player caliber of these, worthy of these awards. Right. And then this happens. And this is like the most predictable outcome ever. But I was just looking at those 70 games last year, and I'm like, he's a different guy. He's changed, but it's the same old story. Even if he comes back, the Pelicans are the worst team in the NBA right now, record-wise. I don't really think Williamson coming back and playing 25 to 28 minutes is going to make them, even close to playoff caliber in the Western Conference right now. The only obviously him coming back, if you have him, you got to play him. There's a reason, that's just they're just going to force your hand. But then I'm also looking at Yves Missy and wondering what kind of impact Williamson's return will have on Yves Missy, who's been playing absolutely fantastic with the Pelicans, super shorthanded.
Yeah. It's something that we've been robbed of with Zion basically playing like 5.5 games this year is, this idea that we could see the Zion at center lineups more often. And, the Pelicans have been banged up in one way or the other really since day one. So we haven't seen this rotation in full at any point, but I think you're right to bring up Yves Missy. I think he's playing well enough. He's playing consistent enough minutes that I wouldn't be panicking on him. I think obviously Zion, as long as he's on this roster, like he's still technically the future of the Pelicans, but as you mentioned, they are 7-29. No team has lost more games this season. They're 11 games out of the 10 seed in the Western Conference. Like, it's curtains on this season. I don't think, even though this roster is not, as bad as the other teams that are in that range, like it's certainly better than Utah, Portland, Charlotte, Washington, etc. I don't think they're making up that much ground, in a matter of months. So I from a developmental standpoint, I still think they want to see what they have in Yves Missy. And the other thing, we go through this every year with Zion. It's like, all right, let's say he comes back on, I don't know, Wednesday on the second night of a back-to-back. That's great. How long do you trust him to stay healthy, right? It's like, you talk about wanting to set and forget your lineup. So you and I play in a lot of weekly leagues. You got to do it. It is Zion. If he's been on your IR for the last 2 months, you've been waiting for this. You can't just not put him in the lineup, but you're never going to have that full sense of security. It's like, how many games in a row does he have to play where you start to feel comfortable with that? And I would imagine there's a very, very good chance he's not playing back-to-backs, perhaps for the rest of the year, right? Especially with the Pelicans not really playing for anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I would not. I don't even know if he's going to be able to play 30 minutes when he comes back. Like
not right away.
We have no idea, and it's not even like they've set a return date. It just said he may be able to play. He practiced one time. Well, we'll see. Or he practiced in full one time. He had been doing like limited stuff, individual stuff. So we're really far away from Williamson being like a top tier fantasy contributor.
Yeah, and Alex and I talk about this all the time, but there's always a disconnect too between Zion Williamson, the NBA celebrity, and Zion Williamson, the fantasy player. It's never quite matched up in the way that perhaps we thought it would. We got some interesting news late last night, Kieran. I was doing a spot on VSiN talking football, and all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up at like 10:45 p.m. The Phoenix Suns, we got the rare like breaking news. They're making a lineup change. Like I thought I was getting an alert that like Bradley Beal was being traded or something crazy was happening in Phoenix. No. Chris Haynes reporting that the Suns are going to bench Bradley Beal and Yusuf Nurkic, and they will start Mason Plumlee and Ryan Dunn going forward. So a fairly drastic move here for Phoenix. I mean, we see these situations all the time in the NBA, veteran player who's overpaid, not playing all that well. It's not often that you see somebody with the profile of Bradley Beal being outright benched. I don't feel quite as strongly about the Nurkic move. I don't think that's like that big of a downgrade. But the Suns are in desperation mode. I mean, they're 15-18. They're in 12th right now in the Western Conference. Still only a game and a half out of the 10 spot. Now, I think you still feel okay if you're Phoenix about, getting everybody healthy and at least making the playoffs. But this is a clear, somewhat panic indication, right? I mean, this is not something you do if you don't feel like it's necessary.
Yes, absolute panic. Mike Budenholzer is disappointed they've lost 4 in a row, so they're making a change by sticking with the same lineup that they had during that losing streak. Like I get this, but like Ryan Dunn and Mason Plumlee have started 3 of the last 4 games, not the same 3 of the last 4 games,
right?
But they've each started 3 of the last 4 games. So you've seen this starting lineup already, and this is what's led to the losing streak, and you're going to stick with that. But you're going to rebrand it in it's making a change. I'm confused. I'm not really sure what's going on here. Ryan Dunn, multi-talented rookie. Maybe he has some streaming value. I don't really think there's much to draw from a fantasy perspective here other than Beal and Nurkic are trending downward, which they had already been trending downward. So.
Yeah, it's been disappointing, certainly for Beal. He was somebody that I had some interest in draft season just because the cost was so low, and you kind of felt like if he could just stay healthy, there's at least going to be a baseline there. I mean, he's really dropped off, especially over these last couple of games. The splash games have been there every now and then, but a good game for Bradley Beal is now like 21 points and 4 assists when it used to be like 38 and 6 assists. So I think we just kind of have to lower the bar as far as what to expect for him. I think this is a pretty clearly a defensive motivated move. Phoenix, for as shaky as they've been, they're under 500. They're still a top 10 offense in the NBA this season. Not surprising when you have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker on the roster, but they're down to 25th in defense. I mean, they're in the same range as teams like Brooklyn, Indiana, Portland, Toronto. Like Chicago has a better defense right now than the Suns do season long. And you mentioned Ryan Dunn. Like that's the sell on Ryan Dunn is, he's almost like as a prospect kind of reminded me of like the Matisse Thybulle archetype. Dunn is a bigger body than Matisse Thybulle. He's more of a true 3-4 as opposed to a 2-3, but one of those guys at Virginia who just put up insane defensive numbers, permanent steals, permanent blocks for a guy of his size. And, so far it hasn't quite translated to the NBA to maybe to the degree that we thought. But I think if you're in a deeper league, if you're in a 14 or 16 teamer, I would look at picking him up for the steals and blocks potential. Like if he's going to be playing 30 to 35 minutes, which I think this move would suggest, he's already done that over the last 2 games. Like he's definitely a guy who could average, if the minutes are there, 1+ steals, 1+ blocks pretty easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to the Beal thing, going back to the playoffs last year when Ant made him look like a statue or a cone on multiple occasions, like I was kind of giving Beal a break for that performance because he was coming back from an injury.
Right.
He has not looked anything like the star form that he had been early in his career. Dunn definitely worth an add in deeper leagues. But like I said, like he's not going to like win you anything. He's just going to be a solid play that, you hope you can get that defensive production from on a nightly basis.
All right, other news around the NBA this weekend, had a fairly big injury in Houston. Jabari Smith going down with a broken hand. That happened at shoot-around of all times on Friday. So we've had a little bit of time to digest this one. Obviously has not played in either of their last 2 games. Fell in Boston on Friday and then eked out a win, blew a big lead and still hung on to beat the Lakers last night. But we're looking at, I would think at least past the All-Star break for Jabari Smith. They gave us a pretty wide range on this one. You've been doing NBA news coverage as I have for a very long time. You start to get a read on things like this. 4 to 8 weeks. So I guess technically he could come back right before the All-Star break. It could be something that he's dealing with even coming out of the break. But given the timing, I would be very, very surprised if we see him until after the break.
Yeah, you gotta love the 3 to 6 weeks, the 4 to 8 weeks, like that. Those are 2 different timetables, guys. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking right at Amen Thompson to fill the gap left by Jabari. Following a 2-game suspension, Amen posted 23 points, 16 boards, 3 assists, and a steal in 41 minutes. He set season or career highs in field goals attempted, field goals made, rebounds, and minutes played. So like, maybe it was a little bit of him coming back from suspension. They wanted to get him involved, get him back, get a feel for the game sort of thing. But I don't, maybe don't expect that type of usage every night, but like he is going to be a key fixture of this lineup. Great defensively, great rebounder. There's not much of a 3-point shot. So that is like the one downside there. And then you also look at Cam Whitmore, who's kind of like the complete opposite. He's a streaky shooter who will make a bunch of threes, but he's not going to really offer you much else. Amon's going to start, and I feel like this has been a year and a half in the making since his rookie year. Like it's just been a matter of can he get those minutes, because when he gets those minutes, the stat sheet just explodes all over the place.
The other piece of this is Tari Eason, right? Who I think would be the obvious guy to perhaps start and certainly benefit from this. And, we don't have a timetable on him. He's now missed 9 games in a row. There was a time, midway through last week where, he was listed as questionable for that game against Dallas, felt like he had a decent chance to play. He ended up, not playing Friday. He was listed as doubtful last night against the Lakers. And there's a fair amount of mystery as far as what's going on with the lower leg, but it seems to be more than just, like a bruise or something that he has to wait out. Like, I don't really know where this is going, but I think he's the piece that if he were to come back, at any point in the next couple of weeks, things could get a little bit dicey. Certainly feel better about Amen Thompson than I do Cam Whitmore. But Whitmore is one of those guys who doesn't need 35 minutes to be productive. Like, if he could just play like 20 to 25, I think in deeper leagues, he's a guy that I would certainly consider. But I'm looking at Amen Thompson. If we're talking like what's the upside over the next month? So this season, he has played 13 games in which he saw at least 30 minutes. In those games, he's averaging 17 points, 10 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.6 steals, 1.3 blocks, 61% from the field. He is a terrible three-point shooter. Like you said, he'll take 1 or 2, maybe 3 per game, but he knows he's not a good three-point shooter, so it doesn't kill his field goal percentage.
Yeah, that's fantastic. If I'm playing in a category league, obviously, hopefully you're in a league where you're punting field goal or a free throw percentage, punting 3 points. He's like the ideal candidate. But obviously, that he doesn't hurt you in the field goal percentage department because, like you said, he knows that he's not going to be cashing corner threes left and right. So he takes really smart shots. He runs the offense. Fred VanVleet hasn't really been spectacular this season. So they've kind of needed, an offensive, like a playmaker aside from Jalen Green. I'm all on the Amen Thompson hype train. I also think Asar Thompson, his brother, is going to be in a pretty good position now too in Detroit with Jaden Ivey injury. But Asar, he might not be able to play the 30 plus minutes because he's coming back from the blood clot issue and all of that. So way higher on Amen right now for sure. But both of them are in good spots.
I do think to put a bow on the Houston conversation, somewhat of a blessing in disguise. Jabari Smith had started to play a little bit better lately, but, kind of felt like he was being marginalized yet again for like the 3rd straight year. And, this is a team that has like too many guys, especially at the 3-4 spot. And, it just felt like, barring a situation like this, we weren't going to get to see like the fully unleashed Amen Thompson. We weren't seeing much Cam Whitmore through the first couple months of the season. So not saying I'm pro injury. I'm not saying I'm glad Jabari Smith is hurt, but I think we're going to see a more fun version of this Rockets team because Amen Thompson is on that short list of guys who I want to see playing 30 plus minutes a night. So it'll be very interesting to see how that goes. Again, Jabari Smith out 4 to 8 weeks dealing with that broken hand. Saw a couple matchups between Nikola Jokic and Victor Wembanyama this past week, Kieran. I know you had some notes on those. Back-to-back games between the Spurs and the Nuggets. They split those. Spurs won the first one, 113-110. Denver turns around a couple nights ago and wins the second matchup, 122-111.
Yeah, this was a really fun one from a fan perspective, but also I'm in a points league where I had Jokic and I was playing Wembanyama. So that watching that going back and forth was pretty awesome. I think they both scored at least 20 points, fantasy points in each of those games. During those 2 games, Jokic totaled 47 points, 27 boards, 19 assists, 4 steals, and 2 blocks. Wemby totaled 55 points, 41 boards, 7 assists, 6 blocks, and 2 steals. I mean, you said Wemby and company got the W on Friday. Jokic willed the Nuggets to an overtime win on Saturday. Just like prime time NBA viewing. I know the NFL season's winding down. The NFL is trying to steal Christmas Day from us. But the NBA is absolutely on fire right now. This weekend was awesome. I was tuning into Boston OKC over any of the NFL games yesterday. I just wanted to throw that out there and celebrate being a fan for a little bit because, the fantasy side can drown us a little bit, but basketball is in a really good spot right now, no matter what everybody's saying. For too many 3-pointers, blah, 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 blah. No, NBA is in a great spot right now.
So SGA has overtaken Jokic in the MVP odds right now at DraftKings. SGA minus 145, Jokic plus 130. Pretty big drop off down to Giannis at 12-1, Tatum at 20-1. Luka's out of it. He's going to miss too many games. I still think it's a 3-man race. I don't think Giannis is totally out of this. Obviously the Bucks losing to the Nets and the Trailblazers, maybe a little bit of anti-recency bias. He was 10-1 like 3 days ago, so we've already seen a little movement there. But for your money, are you betting SGA? Are you betting Jokic? It's the stats are there for both of them, but obviously OKC has the big edge in terms of record.
I can't say anything bad about OKC right now. I gotta go Shea. Maybe there's some bias with trying to give it to Jokic one more time. But the Thunder are just like, you look at the Cavs, and yes, they have a similar record, but I think the Thunder are just on another level right now. I mean, they beat Boston and New York this weekend. Two of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference, but the way they did it was what surprised me. They beat New York 37-19 in the fourth quarter to blow that game out. And then against Boston, they won the fourth quarter 29-12. Like, this Boston team had everyone available. This was a Sunday afternoon game. So primetime viewing, maybe the players weren't really up for it, but like Boston, OKC, like you got to be able to get up for that. They dominated the fourth quarter of these games. It was kind of like, when you're a pickup team or you're an AAU team and you're better than everyone else, but like you don't always play that way. They kind of did that for the first 3 quarters of both these games, and then they're like, all right, let's do it. And that type of mindset comes from SGA because that's how he plays. I'm taking SGA to win MVP at this point in the season. I can't really go anywhere else just because of the team struggles from the Nuggets and Bucks.
You mentioned the Knicks being at full strength. Brunson was a little banged up going into it. Jalen Brown was banged up for Boston. They both ended up playing. Ironically, OKC is the team that's not at full strength, right? And doing all this without Chet Holmgren. I mean, they've lost, 1 game since Isaiah Hartenstein returned? I mean, just no drop-off whatsoever. That timed out pretty well, by the way. I think if they were without both of those guys, obviously that would be difficult to overcome. But Alex and I were talking about there's a market on DraftKings right now of like a team to win 70 plus games, and OKC has like by far the shortest odds. There's only a handful of options. It's basically OKC, Boston, or Cleveland, and Cleveland has a better record than OKC right now, but the Thunder are dramatically shorter to win 70. And I think the thinking is like, all right, they're already feeling like the best team. If you want to make the case that just based on pure record, Cleveland's been better, whatever. I think OKC is a better team, not by much. But they're going to add their second best player at some point, right? I mean, this is wild. It's like the Magic doing what they were doing without Banchero, extremely impressive. Not as good of an overall roster as what OKC is throwing out there, but OKC has been the best team in the NBA for a month plus without Chet Holmgren.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex sent out, the daily gambling article email this morning, and he had his little fun fact, and he said the Thunder are the only team in the NBA this season that has yet to record a goaltending violation. And that doesn't really mean anything, but it's just kind of funny to like how good they are defensively. They have Chet. They had Chet. They have Hartenstein. They're so good defensively, and they play so sound. And that stat doesn't really mean anything, but it just shows, to me, it kind of signifies like just how cohesive they are as a unit. No one's trying to play out of position. They're playing within the system, and they're letting their stars shine.
All right, we got some good questions stacking up in the chat. We'll hit a few of those now. Our pal DJ says, happy Monday, fellas. Now that Kawhi is back, I need someone to drop so I can take him out of the IR spot. Should I drop Beal, who appears to be a bench player now, or Kessler? He's in a 10-team head-to-head points league.
That's interesting. I mean, look, like we were talking about availability. Kessler has played in 19 straight games. He missed a stretch in mid-November, but he's not sitting out back-to-backs. He's playing 30-plus minutes. He's starting every game. He's coming off of 4 double-doubles in the last 5 games, still blocking shots like crazy. Well, not so much recently, but over that 19-game stretch I mentioned. I think this is pretty elementary for me. Like, I'm dropping Beal just with this move to the bench and having to compete with KD and Devin Booker. I just don't see the upside for Beal, where Kessler does have that upside if he blocks 5-6 shots in a game.
Yeah, I'm with you. Kessler's been the better player so far. If you're just talking points league averages, the high volume rebounding, the occasional high volume blocks games, they maybe don't help you quite as much in a points league as they would categories, but he's he's still the more dependable player. And, I know you're in a 10-team league, but if those are your two options, you must be doing okay here.
Yeah.
It's like Bradley Beal, as frustrating as it's been, it's like he's still somebody who should be rostered for the most part. But you have to see it through with Kawhi, right? I think you could ask the same questions about Kawhi as we talked about, with Zion earlier in the show, as far as, okay, he's back, but how, if you're in a weekly league, for example, are you really comfortable locking him in and expecting him to play all 4 games on the schedule? We'll see. But once he's up to speed, he'll be a good enough player that this makes sense. So I would agree with Kieran here and say you got to drop Bradley Beal.
The only thing about the Kawhi Zion is like the Clippers are actually like competing right now, right? So like there's more incentive for him to, stay healthy and play maybe back. He probably won't play back to backs, but play more minutes, play in tighter games, that sort of thing.
All right, question here from Victor. He said he's in a 9-cat league. Who are you taking? Mark Williams or Jarrett Allen?
That is very tough. Mark Williams has been fantastic, and I feel like we've been waiting for this. He's been dealing with all these injuries over the last 6 games. He's averaged 15 points, 10 boards, a block, nearly a steal a game, 2.5 assists, 65% from the field. Though I want to say Mark Williams just because of this recent production, but I think I got to go Allen. The Cavs are not going to be resting guys. They're going to want this to fight for the 1 seed. He's probably the better overall player on the better team, even if Williams is having a nice little spurt right now.
Yeah, this is still pretty easily Jarrett Allen for me. He's been really healthy throughout his career. Mark Williams has not. One team is extremely competitive, the other is not. I think you look at some of the down games for Jarrett Allen. They've come almost exclusively in blowouts, and like the Cavs win so many blowout games that there are a lot of nights where you're seeing like 25 to 28 minutes instead of 30 plus. But the Hornets also get blown out a ton, so I think that's kind of a wash. One way I would look at it is like Mark Williams is playing really well over the last 10 games, as you mentioned, and this like best stretch of his season, probably best stretch of his career, is like what Jarrett Allen is doing, just kind of on like an average to maybe below average week. So I would easily favor Jarrett Allen here if you have to pick one of the two. All right, Big Gucci John says, morning guys, hope you love the show. Appreciate you watching, listening along. Wondering if DeMar DeRozan is a keep for rest of season. So basically, would you be looking to offload DeMar DeRozan if you're rostering him?
Yeah. I think with the Kings struggles, you probably are looking to offload everything. But again, like I'm not going to trade DeMar DeRozan for Keon Ellis or something like that. Like you're still going to need something of value, whether you're trading him or something pops up on the waiver wire. Like I would think like Bryce Sensabaugh is probably like the number 1 waiver wire right now, coming off 2 big scoring performances. Lauri Markkanen, John Collins, Jordan Clarkson, they're all in trade rumors. I wouldn't drop DeMar DeRozan to pick up Bryce Sensabaugh at this point. But like obviously like I would be trying to shop him if you can in the trade market, but you don't want to give him up for nothing for sure.
It depends kind of where you are, I suppose, in your league. It's like this has been, by all accounts, a pretty disastrous last month for DeMar DeRozan. He's still averaging 18 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, over a steal, 47% from the field. He's getting to the line a ton. He's shooting 90% at the line. So it's, like the bad games have been really bad. Like even in, that blowout the other night against Golden State, got completely out of hand. They won that game by 30. They were up bigger for most of it. So, it's easy to look and say, what, DeRozan only had 12 points. Well, I mean, game script was a big part of it. He had that one like terrible game where I think they got blown out by like Indiana. And he had like 2 points. Like that was really rock bottom. It's been better since then. So no, I don't look at DeRozan as like a sinking ship, must sell. He's at the point in his career where, you do wonder if there is just some decline. He's been around for a long time. But I think that was probably baked in coming into the year. And in general, he's been super consistent throughout his career. So if you can get somebody back who, let's say you're in 8th place in your league and you're trying to make an upside play, I don't hate it. Like I'm not saying you shouldn't deal him, but I don't think you have to trade DeMar DeRozan. All right, Joseph says PJ Washington or Jeremy Sochan, 10-team 9-cat league. He's punting threes and turnovers.
I like Sochan. Obviously the production recently hasn't been great. He's missed a game during that stretch, which was the front end of a back-to-back. So maybe he'll be sitting out back-to-backs in the future. So that can be a little concerning. This is kind of, I like Sochan more as like a player and as like a future asset for, keeper leagues or whatever. But with all of the injuries in Dallas, I think PJ Washington has to be the play here. I know you said you're punting threes, so like that may really not pan out very well. In that situation, Sochan would be the better player. But with all of the injuries in Dallas, Washington's going to have the usage, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I lean Washington here, partially because of what you just said. We're still without Luka for at least another 3 weeks. No Kyrie for the next couple of weeks. I would want to at least see that through. Give it a week and see how much, if any, elevated usage we see for PJ Washington. I think he's just going to be more consistent on balance, and he's more of a 3-point shooter than Sochan, but it's not like his whole value is he's hitting 4 threes a game. Like, he's only taken 4 threes per game this season. He's taken like 2 fewer than he was last year. So on balance, I think you're going to get a little bit more out of Washington. Another question from Joseph. He says, if you're strong in rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks, but weak in threes, points, and free throws, which of those 3 categories is typically easier to improve or stream in from the waiver wire? So kind of a philosophical strategy question here. So you're basically looking to improve threes, points, and free throws.
I think threes is the easiest thing to improve as you stream later in the season. You look at like Boston, Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser were kind of guys you could stream in at the end of last season. In Cleveland, you had Niang and Sam Merrill. There's always guys on the waiver wire that could hit 4 or 5 threes in a night. You're not going to really find a guy on the waiver wire that's going to go 10 for 11 from the free throw line, right? Or score 40 points. Those guys normally get snatched up pretty easily. So I think threes is the answer here.
Yeah, and obviously there's a correlation between threes and points. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Duncan Robinson is like always out there. You mentioned some of the other names, Corey Kispert, Luke Kennard. Like even in like the 16 team leagues that we play in, Kieran, those guys tend to be out there. So I think that's the right answer. And good 3-point shooters also tend to be good free throw shooters. The problem is improving free throw is really tough because
you're not going to
get the volume. You're not going to get the volume. Like you'll find all these guys who are like, oh, he's shooting 88% on the year. Well, he's taking like 1 free throw every other game. So that one I think is the toughest, but you're not going to take a hit typically by adding a good 3-point shooter because those guys tend to be good free throw shooters as well. All right. Mal says Bobby Portis or Jalen Duren rest of season, 9-cat league, 8 teams head to head. So pretty shallow league overall. Bobby Portis or Jalen Duren?
Portis has been pretty strong over the last 11 games, 17 points, 9 boards, 3 assists, 1.5 steals, nearly a block per game. The stories out of Detroit with Duren have not been positive. I know the Pistons are winning games relative, for their standards compared to last year. But Duren has not been the guy that we really thought. 5 and 7 in the last game. He's got a couple double-doubles over the last week or two. I think Portis is the higher upside here. Giannis has been on the injury report a lot. Chris Middleton just got downgraded from probable to doubtful today, so he'll probably miss games. I think there's going to be opportunities for Portis to have those BP games going forward, and I think he just has the higher upside.
All right, Jay says, hey, what's up, guys? What's up, Jay? Who would you rather have rest of season? Nikola Jovic, not Jokic, Nikola Jovic or Kel'el Ware? So we're getting into the meat of this Miami situation, which I wanted to touch on anyway. And Jay adds that this is a 12-team points league. So if we're looking for some value here, obviously Jimmy Butler suspended. Maybe he'll remain with the Heat. Maybe he'll be traded. I would imagine it's probably more likely the latter. But looking at what we know right now, Jovic or Ware?
I had Jovic in our CBS keeper league. I thought he started a lot of games last year. He started a lot of games this year. The production is just never there. Ware's fun. But maybe he gets an expanded opportunity. Obviously Jovic is starting right now. So he has like that kind of like boost, but like, again, it doesn't really matter if you're starting and still not performing. So I think I'm going Ware here, but this is pretty nitty gritty stuff.
So in 10 starts this season, Jovic has averaged 8.5 points, 3 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1.2 steals, 1.2 threes. Pretty underwhelming. But he's like, the starting doesn't even seem to matter. Like he's playing fewer than 20 minutes per game in those starts. We only have 1 game under their belt since the Butler suspension. dropped, and that was like a 40-point loss to Utah on Saturday. So I don't know how much we can really take from that. This is another one where I'll cop out and say it depends where you are in the standings. Like if you're just looking to plug somebody in a 12-team points league, I think Jovic is going to give you a higher floor. If you're looking for a jolt and somebody who could in theory take off, I think that has to be Ware, right? Undoubtedly the more tantalizing prospect of the two. Now in the minutes that we've seen Ware, like non-garbage time, like he had that big game against Indy and that ugly loss where Jimmy Butler basically gave up. I think that was last Thursday. Scored 25 points, 9 of 11 shooting, 3 of 4 from 3, 0 rebounds in 21 minutes. Did have 3 blocks though, which is nice. Like he's going to be a high volume shot blocker. You worry about the effort, you worry about the focus. Like a guy who's 7'1" and that athletic grabbing 0 rebounds in 21 minutes against the Pacers is a little bit concerning to me. But again, if you're shooting for some upside, I think Ware has to be that guy.
I'd like to ask my high school coach how a 7-footer gets 0 rebounds. He would probably go out for about an hour.
Well, I say you and I are Wisconsin guys. Greg Gard was getting on Stephen Crowell not that long ago for a 0 rebound game. All right, this is a good one. Crazy offer in my 10-team head-to-head points league. I send Fox, Barnes, and Kawhi for Giannis and Reaves.
Is this Scottie Barnes?
I don't know.
Okay.
Based on the offer, I don't know. I was thinking I just assumed Harrison Barnes, but that's a fair question. If it's Scottie Barnes, I would say probably don't do this. If it's Harrison Barnes, I would do it.
Yes, agreed. It is Scottie.
Yeah, well, we'll leave it at that. Okay, it is in fact Scottie Barnes. We have confirmation. So to return to this, De'Aaron Fox, Scottie Barnes, Kawhi Leonard for Giannis and Reaves.
Yeah, I mean, Reaves 20-point triple-double, like nearly triple-doubles on a nightly basis, it seems like. But, Kawhi's coming back. Maybe you get a bounce back from Fox. It would kind of be like selling at the lowest point for both of those guys. So I just kind of wait out the storm here and see if Fox and Kawhi can jolt you back up the standings.
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, Giannis is the best player in the deal in a points league, and Reaves has been so good. Like this, I don't think this is that crazy, to be honest, but I'm not really a huge Kawhi guy, but I think you bring up a good point that it's like you wait for him to come back and now you throw him in a deal like this. It's like I think I would at least want to see if I can get something out of Kawhi. If I've held him for 2.5 months, I don't want to necessarily punt after just one game. But good question there and a fun trade. All right, Ant says, "Hey fellas, appreciate the show. Appreciate you watching. Thoughts on trading Cam Johnson for Dyson Daniels? Am I giving up too much? Category league, 16 teams. So Cam for Dyson Daniels. I'll just ask you, Kyrie. I don't know which side Ant is on here, but which player would you rather have?
I would rather have Dyson Daniels for the long run, strictly because we don't know where Cam Johnson's going to be playing in a month.
Yeah.
And if he goes to the Lakers, he's not going to be getting the usage that he is in Brooklyn. Anywhere he goes, really, he's not going to be getting that type of usage. So I think I would rather have Dyson here.
I'm with you. I think you said the key point. For one, Cam Johnson's currently banged up, dealing with an ankle injury. He is somebody who's missed some time, over the last few years. And the far bigger concern is a trade. And even if he finds himself in a much better basketball situation, which is extremely likely, it's going to be a worse fantasy situation. I mean, he's spent a good chunk of this year as basically the number one option in Brooklyn, with Cam Thomas missing time. So I would, especially if you're in a category league, like I want the steals from Dyson Daniels. It is not slowed down at all. It's such a massive advantage. I would take Dyson. All right. Well, Herb Jones has been speed dating our whole league via waivers this season. Trey Murphy has been on fire. Is it sustainable, or will it take a Brandon Ingram trade to lock in for the home stretch / fantasy playoffs? So basically, where are we at on Trey Murphy?
I'm always high on Trey Murphy. Anytime Trey Murphy is able to get 30 minutes or is starting, I'm all aboard that hype train. Brandon Ingram is probably going to get traded. He doesn't seem like he wants to be there. There's no extension talks, whatever. I think Trey Murphy has the higher upside here. Did he specify what kind of league? No. Obviously, Herb Jones, the defensive stats are there, but Trey Murphy, the last 2 games, he has 3 blocks, 3 steals. He's had at least a steal in, 10 of the last 12 games. Like he can provide defensive production too, and the offense is just way above what Herb can offer. So I like going with we got a 8-cat league in this one. So I think I'm going that makes it a little bit difficult, but I think I'm still going Trey Murphy.
All right, we'll hit a few more before we get out of here. And our question asker said it was an 8-category league, by the way, for that one. This is a really interesting trade question, a 2-for-2 deal from Anthony. He says, I got someone offering CJ McCollum and Miles Turner for Jakob Poeltl and Coby White. Is it worth it in the long run?
That's going to take some contemplate. Coby White's on fire right now. Obviously, McCollum is also. He just had tied a career high or posted a career high. And then you got Toronto probably is going to be tanking. We'll see how much Poeltl plays. The Bulls will be, in the classic play-in tournament for the ever and ever and ever for the rest of their organization's history. This is really tough. Depending on what kind of league, obviously Turner offers a lot of threes, not a lot of threes, but a lot of threes for center and blocks. I am a Bulls fan, so maybe that plays some bias into here, but I'll go with Poeltl and Coby White. I think McCollum will take a hit when Zion comes back, and McCollum, that's kind of definitely an outlier this season, even if he gets more usage in the short term here.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting deal for a lot of reasons. You mentioned the Raptors as a potential tanking team. I would worry about Poeltl at the end of the year. I actually thought he would drop off sooner, and he has not. He's continued to play really well. The return of Olynyk has just not really mattered. But the Pelicans are worse than the Raptors, and you wonder about them pulling the plug at some point too. So I think those almost cancel out. Poeltl and Turner have been really comparable. White and McCollum have been really comparable as far as to-date fantasy production. Man, it's like if I could combine these, like who I would really rather have is like Turner and Coby White, if that makes sense. Like if you could find a way, like if you could just do like McCollum for Coby White, I would try to do that. Like I think what we have not mentioned as far as Coby is what if Levine is traded? What if Vucevic is traded? Like I think there could be another level up for Coby White. We could see last year's version of Coby White more consistently, and he's already been really good this year. So like of those four, like he's the guy that I would be the most excited about the stretch run. Like the Bulls are not bad enough that they're going to completely tank. I think he'll avoid, being rested or anything like that. And I think there's a world in which he's basically the number one option for the final couple months.
Let me ask you, does having Toronto's starting lineup, their preferred starting lineup for the first time, does that increase or decrease Poeltl's fantasy outlook for you, or just keep it the same?
Probably more of a no change. I mean, it's not, he was putting up some pretty crazy scoring games for a while, like when Barnes was out and Quickly was out, Barrett's been in and out. So I think we're certainly looking at a lower scoring ceiling for sure. But really, you're in it for the defensive stats, which have been really consistent. The rebounds have been pretty good. He gives you a couple assists. So it's a slight downgrade, but not by much. All right. Another good trade question involving Jakob Poeltl. David says, hey guys, got offered Poeltl for Porzingis. Should I do this immediately? Porzingis currently having a slump. So I think he has Porzingis and he has a chance to trade him straight up for Poeltl.
Yeah, I think I would do this. We talked about Toronto maybe being a tanking team, but Kristaps is in and out of the lineup as is. The Celtics are going to be a good team, so they can afford resting him. They got the perfect backup in Al Horford. I think you do this trade and you just hope you can get as much production out of Poeltl as possible that it may offset a potential tanking at the end. Poeltl could be traded. That's a very real possibility too. I think Poeltl is the better fantasy player, so you just make this trade and reap the benefits in the short term, and then if Toronto is tanking and he gets thrown on IR, you make adjustments when that happens.
All right, we got time for a few more. A lot of great questions here. Unfortunately, we won't get to all of them, but really appreciate everybody throwing questions in here. They're always very good, very poignant. Here's one on Jonathan Kuminga, Kirian. Do I add Kuminga off waivers in a 14-team category league? I will note that yesterday we got news that he's out at least 3 weeks. So you can still add him if you have the IR spot available. Obviously, if you don't, I would wait. Maybe somebody else in your league who has like a free spot might take him. I think in short, in a 14-team league, he should be rostered, no question. I mean, he's averaging over 20 points per game, over 6 rebounds in his last 15. But kind of eye of the beholder. It depends on your league settings as far as IR goes, because he's going to miss, could be close to a month.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, 14 teams, he needs to be rostered. Obviously, whoever dropped him is probably doing pretty good. If you're at the bottom of the standings, you probably don't want to make this move just because he's not going to help you jump the standings in the next couple of weeks. And in the next couple of weeks, we're already going to be looking at the fantasy playoff situation. So it depends on where you are. If you're sitting at 1-2 spot in your standings and you're like, I can afford having a bench guy not play for a couple of weeks, absolutely. If you are right on the cusp of playoff contention, you're going to need an available body to provide your points. I just want to mention one more thing. Like, why do these injuries always happen to guys that are just like playing probably the best ball of their career? Like Paulo, Franz, Kuminga, like they seem to have this burst of awesome production and then go down with injuries. It's terrible.
All right, this is somewhat of a tough one as far as like giving out, like, go get this exact player. But if you're looking to trade DeMar DeRozan, Kieran, do any names come to mind as far as, potential targets? Somebody you could conceivably throw in an offer?
I don't know. For me, this, like you said, this is a very difficult one because in trades, you kind of got to play your league mates, right? Like it's playing poker. You're not playing your cards. You're playing your league mates. So in my leagues, Austin Reaves has been a guy that a lot of people have been trying to sell high on. He's been absolutely fantastic this season. I don't think, anybody rostering Reaves would probably want to do this trade right now.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting Reaves right now.
But like, I have Josh Hart in multiple leagues, and multiple people have sent me Austin Reaves for Josh Hart. You could look at a guy like Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges, like, never misses games. His production, people can laugh at his jump shot or whatever, but like, Mikal Bridges is a very safe play, whereas DeRozan at this point is kind of a sporadic play. Something along those lines where you're just getting a guy that you can trust on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's tough because DeRozan doesn't miss time, so it's like there are some guys out there who are, higher variance, in terms of how many games they'll play, but there could be more upsides. Like if you want to shoot lower, we're looking at our overall rankings for the season as far as, real life production goes. It's like Miles Bridges, Josh Giddey. You could roll the dice on someone like Herb Jones. If
I would much rather have Josh Giddey than DeRozan at this point.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting one. You could do like a RJ Barrett maybe. If that manager is a little bit lower on him with Quickly back in the mix. He's missed some time lately. I would love to say you could get Reaves for him, but if I had Austin Reaves, I would not be giving him up right now for DeMar DeRozan. All right, we'll do a couple more here. We had a lot of Pelicans questions. We'll kind of try to hit these all together. Is it time to abandon ship on DeJounte Murray with the Pelicans having the worst record in the NBA? We had a question about Yves Missi as well. Do I trade him away while his value is high, or do I keep him? Pelicans, could shut down the season at some point, and you're always worried about Zion's health. And then there was another one about Herb Jones. Where does Herb Jones' value hover right now with Zion coming back? And again, the potential tanking shutdown concerns for the Pelicans. So we'll try to hit these names together, Kieran, but let's start with the shutdown angle. Like, is that a real concern? 2, who would be most impacted by that? And 3, could this also be a team that's looking to just sell everybody at the deadline? I think Brandon Ingram being hurt and out indefinitely kind of clouds that right now. But I have a bunch of Pelicans, our Vegas league, which I did not draft for the record, but somebody drafted it for me, and I have like 5 Pelicans on that roster, which has been a total disaster. What are you doing with any of these guys? Because they have a lot of big names. They should not be as bad as they are.
No, they should not be as bad as they are. And, I think Zion coming back, may help DeJounte a little bit. Like, I'm not moving DeJounte, in a standard league at all. Maybe if you get a good trade offer. I think tanking is a real possibility here. Let's just start there. They're 7-29. That's 36 games. That's not just short of the halfway mark. They are currently 10 games out of 11th place. Like they're not even close. They're not even close to competing for a play-in spot. So, they've won 2 in a row. That's about all I can say there. I think tanking is a real possibility. I think Brandon Ingram's going to get traded. I think they're going to try and build around DeJounte may get traded. I think they're going to try and build, Trey Murphy, Jordan Hawkins, Yves Missi. Like, those are the guys that probably won't be affected by tanking. The guys that will be affected by tanking are Zion, DeJounte, Brandon Ingram, tanking / trading. We'll just throw that in the same group.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's a very real possibility.
Yeah, I think you said it well. Misi is probably the guy that I'm the least worried about.
Yeah.
Like, I think Misi, Murphy, Herb Jones, like those are 3 guys that I would be surprised if they ended up trading. I think McCollum, Murray, Ingram, if he's healthy enough, all those guys could be dealt. McCollum under contract at a little over 33 mil this year, actually decreases down to about 30.5 million next year. So not an expiring deal, but one that's certainly more movable now than it would have been this time last year. Yeah, it's really frustrating, man. Really frustrating. And you mentioned how far they're out of the 11. Like they're not getting in the playoff mix. Right? We could cross that off. It's more of a matter of if they do opt to really gun for, you got to get in the bottom 4, right? There's no merit in being the worst record or the second worst. You just got to have one of the 4 worst records. And the biggest threats right now would be Utah, Washington, Charlotte, Toronto. All those teams have single-digit wins. You got Portland with 12 wins, and you got Brooklyn with 13. So in my mind, there are 7 teams competing for that bottom 4. Like that's enough that you might have to do some maneuvering.
I think that's very fair. I just don't really like. They're in a weird spot because if they're going to trade McCollum or Ingram, or trade these guys, like they're going to have to play some games, right? But even when they were playing games, they weren't winning a lot. So it's interesting. They're on a 2-game win streak. That's all I'll say for now. We'll see. We'll check back next week.
I just got an alert that the Bucks and the Grizzlies are among the teams that are involved in Jimmy Butler discussions, by the way. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll have to hit that later in the week, but good stuff as always, man. I really appreciate you stepping in for Alex. We will wish him good luck. Make sure we check in on his status on the official NBA injury report on Tuesday. You'll be filling in for Alex on SiriusXM tonight as well, so you could catch all the NBA talk you need. We talk fantasy, we talk betting, we give you starting lineups, we give you injury news, 6 to 6:30 p.m. Central over on SiriusXM NBA Radio. Go check that out. We do that show Monday through Friday. If you're watching us here on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball YouTube channel. Give this video a like if you're enjoying it. You can find all of our podcasts live and archived on YouTube. And as you see right there on your screen, rotowire.com/pod. Go to that web address. You could copy it. You could just type it right in. It's not a whole lot of characters. Get a RotoWire account. You don't have to put a credit card in. Basically, it's just like your name and your email, and you'll get free access to everything on our site. You can check out all the tools that we're always using and referencing. You can check out the RotoWire Picks page as well, rotowire.com/picks. Go download the RotoWire Picks app. All that becomes unlocked for you if you just go to rotowire.com/pod.